Welcome to Real Estate Coaching Radio, starring award-winning real estate coaches and #1 international best-selling authors, Tim and Julie Harris. Real Estate Coaching Radio is the nation's #1 daily radio show for realtors who demand authentic, real-time coaching. Get ready for fluff-free, unfiltered, full-strength honesty about what's truly working to get you into action, helping others, and making money now in today's real estate market. Now to our hosts, Tim and Julie Harris.
3, 2, 1. All right, we are back. Happy Friday, everyone. Happy Memorial Day. Memorial Day during a pandemic will feel a little bit different, but there you go. Welcome to today's show, Julie.
Yes, thank you. And it will be an interesting weekend to see how everybody handles it.
Yeah, I know. Exactly how's that going to work? I just ordered a dehumidifier for our garage because we live here in the tropics, and really, essentially, it's like, you know, living in the tropics. So everything needs dehumidified. And I ordered it from Home Depot. We have to swing by Home Depot, but we have to wait for them to text us to set up a half-hour delivery time. And then they do. We have to drive in and wait in the line, and then wait for somebody to come up, ask for a number, so they then could put a dehumidifier in the trunk of our car.
Yes,
that's the new reality.
I know.
It's the weirdest thing.
Certainly
ever.
Isn't easier. That's for sure.
No, that's for sure. So we have a lot of interesting headlines. As always, we are going to do our best to keep you guys way ahead of the curve, and it is fun to see, Julie, that the things that we talk about like 2 weeks ago or the things that people are talking about now, our predicting mechanism, our predicting machine is working well.
Yes.
But you know why? We are, I think, pretty much spot on with everything that we're predicting is going to happen. It's easy for us to have that advantage because we have all of you guys as coaching clients. And all of you are telling us what's happening across the country and in Canada. And we're hearing that, you know, this is what's really going on versus this is what the, you know, news might be reporting. So we will always have leading edge information because we're, frankly, have so many coaching clients, thousands of coaching clients. And between the Premier Coaching Program and between private coaching and, you know, all the other sources and ways we stay in contact with you guys, we get constant, never-ending data streams of this is the truth of what's happening. So, yeah, that's how we're doing it. And we have, you know, more perspective on some of the headlines that are coming out now. And over this sort of long holiday weekend, you're going to be hearing probably a lot more sort of droll news headlines coming out about the economy and housing in particular. And we're going to give you the information that's going to balance out that, you know, that bad news so that you can make your own decision. You can be an informed real estate professional. So when you're running into people, hopefully 6 feet away from each other at your picnics this weekend, you know, I'm saying that with a half smile on my face, knowing that, you know, maybe that is the best course of action. Who knows? It's too soon to tell. But the moral of the story is people are going to be asking you about the real estate market, and this is a way you can know without just sounding like you're just parroting something you heard on CNN. So that's what we are striving to do on today's show to keep you guys informed so people will see you as a caring, competent professional opposed to just another, you know,
person,
real estate agent.
Yes.
That's right. So, headlines, my dear.
All right. Well, in our continuing reporting of what we might call extenuating circumstances, unintended consequences, the Mall of America hasn't paid its mortgage in 2 months. The biggest shopping center in the country, called the Mall of America, has missed 2 months of payments on its, wait for it, $1.4 billion mortgage. That's a big one. Next to hotel owners, retailers have been the hardest hit in the COVID-19 crisis, and basically that's on its way out, I guess.
So what a lot of people, well, probably not, but what a lot of people don't understand is big businesses will use essentially situations like this as an opportunity to renegotiate their deals.
And they can get forbearances too in some cases.
Yeah, but that's probably not at the heart of really what the issue is. The heart of the issue is they probably, you know, wrote their lease, their long-term lease, and their debt structure was, you know, predicated on different economic times. And what they're going to do is basically, you know, create hardship so that they'll pull their investors and maybe even their landlords or however that deal's structured back to the table so they can get a deal that's more congruent with today's financial times. And so when you guys hear about some of these headlines about these bankruptcies, it doesn't necessarily mean those stores and those businesses are going to go out of business. What a bankruptcy does is basically gives people an businesses and people, it gives them an opportunity to basically hit reset on their financial debt structure. And usually that means that the business comes out of it on the other side stronger, or the person does stronger. And it is ironic. I was reading that article, it was a long article, but the gist of it is after individuals or businesses actually go through debt restructuring, even if it's bankruptcy, it's actually easier for them to get credit, which is absolutely crazy. But there it is. So it's not always what the headline would lead you to believe is my point. So don't think that just because you're going to be hearing about Mall of America missing 2 of their monthly payments on their $1.5 billion mortgage. God, can you imagine what that is?
I can't do that quick calculation, but it's a lot.
Let's go to Quicken Loans and put in $1.5 billion and see what the payment is.
I wonder if it can take that many zeros.
Yeah, it must be tens of millions of dollars is the moral of the story. You want to bet it's a Ninja interest-only loan too?
Right, probably.
That's right. Mm-hmm. All right, next news story, Julie.
All right. The pandemic increases the challenges facing business schools. Lockdown has delivered a nasty shock to academia, with universities around the world closing for the summer term, disrupting the plans of millions of students. Business schools are suffering along with the rest, but the shutdown has occurred when they've already been facing a host of problems. A survey of the deans of American business schools found that almost all they all thought the pandemic would lead to permanent closures. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think it's not just business schools. There's a lot of school reporting going on right now.
Well, let's drill down on that. I think that's a really fascinating, situation that's happening. And I think about Verbella, with EXP. So last week, EXP had their online shareholder summit, which is normally in Florida and Orlando. And so here's some interesting statistics. I don't know if I told you this. I know I didn't. So listen. So normally when EXP does their shareholder summit, they have between 2,000 and 3,000 people that fly in from all over the world, basically, hang out in Orlando. They do their thing.
Do their event thing.
Yeah, but 2,000 to 3,000, that's not a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's not.
No.
But I bet you that event costs, realistically, EXP, I don't know about $1 million, but probably $750,000, maybe $1 million, probably that. So that's just spent money. That's just money that essentially, all the tickets and all the, breakout sessions that cost $5 will never cover the cost of those events. That's just a loss. So last week, since basically, the coronavirus has shut everything down, they did shareholders in Verbella, which EXP owns.
Right.
And there are 15,000 unique.
Wow. That's interesting, isn't it?
I just learned that on Thursday. I should have mentioned it yesterday. Yeah, but there are 15,000 unique IP addresses that logged in, which means there's 15, translating nerd there for you guys. That means there's 15,000 different people that attended EXP's event last week on Verbella online. And a lot of people attended it every day, all day. So they basically turned their computers on and they were attending EXP's shareholder summit all day, every day. Well, versus what? Watching Netflix? I mean, At this point, there's no new Netflix to watch.
It's run its course.
Well, so I thought that was really interesting. And then when I came across that article that you just read about Harvard and Yale, I was thinking about...
That's the next one that I'm going to read.
Okay, well, so go ahead. Sorry.
In related education news, and I'm calculating, if a lot of these schools have to go online, really, they can handle more students than they could if they've got to seat everybody. So maybe that's the new profit model, too, for them. Okay, so next headline is Harvard is sued over, quote, subpar online learning amid pandemic. This makes Harvard at least the 4th Ivy League school to be targeted for failing to reimburse educational costs. Following Brown, Columbia, and Cornell, the school is facing a $5 million federal class action lawsuit. Students chose to pursue legal action as a result of not having, quote, received the benefit of an in-person instruction or equivalent access to university facilities and services. Harvard confirmed awareness of the suit in a statement to Campus Reform, although the university had no further comment on it. It's the use of their financing. The finances has been called into question, and the quality. Really.
So the gist of the article is basically, and it's not. This is a normal type of experience for you would expect Harvard and Yale to have some sort of online presence that was up to par, but it wasn't. And you can't throw a bunch of Zoom meetings together and expect that someone's going to be willing to pay the full boat that they would have otherwise for your, ridiculously expensive $75,000 a year MBA program at Harvard, right? Mm-hmm. So the reality of it is that there were thousands of businesses and educational institutions that were caught completely by surprise, and now all of them are rushing to figure out what their new online solution is going to be in anticipation of this happening again, and the fact that people's expectations have changed. And we've been talking to you guys for months about the fact that there are going to be tons and tons of major seismic shifts in the way everybody and everything interacts with each other because of the coronavirus. Because the coronavirus really sort of accelerated, so using this as an example, online education. It used to be online education was somehow like, I don't even know how to describe it. The normal, like the way the media treated it, the way normal universities treated it, the way the government treated it. The online universe was somehow some kind of, plague that needed to be purged from the, academic halls of perfection.
Well, it's like
somehow
an affront to the traditional
right
model.
And it was, because what it is a competition to the traditional model, and the competition doesn't like, the traditional model didn't like the competition. Well, now what coronavirus has done because of it, it's accelerated that acceptance curve by how many decades, God knows, right? To the point now where if Harvard all of a sudden is forced to essentially have a robust online situation for their MBAs, for people paying $75,000 a year to get Harvard MBAs, everyone else is going to do the same thing. And that's one of these transformative things that's really fascinating to watch from the cheap seats where all of us are sitting together, right? Because you're going to see it happening for businesses, obviously schools, universities. I've often wondered, and you and I talked about this like 2 months ago, why is it that they don't do first-run movies like pay-per-view does for like MMA fights and whatnot? Julie's a big MMA fight.
Yeah.
That's
all I do.
She's a big mixed martial arts girl.
You can't tear me away from it. As if.
Well, but really, if you look at boxing and you look at all these other things, you pay a huge amount of money to watch a boxing match that watches the last 3 seconds. Well, why aren't they taking first run movies and this new movie, Tom Cruise, whatever, everyone basically on Friday night is going to be sitting at home in their own home theaters, be it on their iPhones or whatnot, and they're going to be watching this movie, and that's how now why isn't that happen? Because the technology's there. It's because there's these long-term business arrangements and leases with movie theaters. That's why. So here's an interesting prediction for all of you. This is going to be, again, the opportunity for the movie, essentially all the Fox Studios and all these other places, Paramount. This might be the very thing that they've been waiting for to take out the movie theaters, which probably just was a legacy cost. They may have been waiting around for the opportunity to finally put the final nail in the coffin of going to a movie theater. Look, movie theaters are fun. They're, they are what they are. But I'd much rather watch a movie at home, I would, than basically being stuck in some dark, dank, nasty, sort of stinky, God knows what's going on around you place.
Now.
Right. And now people are going to, I can't be alone in thinking that. And so now coronavirus is going to probably usher along a whole new era in something as silly as first-run movies, which I think is exciting and it's great. And you're seeing like car dealers. Oh my gosh. We have friends that have, droves of car dealerships and new car dealerships, and they have not sold any cars. Like one of them had sold 4 cars in the month of March or something. And I forget how many employees he had and the whole thing. And he was, very well off and wasn't overly concerned about it. But how's the car business going to change now, in essence, since people don't have to travel as much, since they're going to be sticking at home more? They don't have to maybe be sitting. You guys see all these unintended consequences? They're good ones and then they're bad ones. Unintended consequences on the good side is what you need to be focusing on, because that's where you're going to look for that's where you're going to see the most opportunity. And again, we've been talking on our podcast about the macro housing trends that are starting to change, and we're going to share more and more of that information that, by the way, we learned directly from our coaching clients. All right, here's another interesting article. Julie, did you see the one I sent you from CNBC about mortgage bailout?
Yes. At first, some who took the mortgage bailout didn't need it, but now most do. Of the 4.25 million homeowners who were in forbearance, gosh, that's a ton, at the end of April, nearly half of them actually did make their monthly mortgage payment anyway. However, as of this week, 4.75 million homeowners are in government or private sector mortgage forbearance programs, equivalent to 9% of all mortgages outstanding. New analysis shows a large number of these borrowers initially did not need the bailout, but now more do. So while the number of new borrowers entering the plan slowed, Black Knight found a surprising twist in the data. Of the 4.25 million homeowners in forbearance, half of them made their payment and 54% did not. They expect that to change this month. As of May 19th, just 21% had made their May payment. So you can see it's already going down. And, people are doing pretty much exactly what we talked about when this was rolled out. Set it up, have a backup plan. You don't know what's going to happen. Okay, first month you felt confident. Now they're starting to miss payments.
And Julie's talking about mortgage forbearance. We've spent a lot of time on our podcast and a lot of time in coaching telling you guys how to get forbearances, begging and pleading that you do it, even if, as you were just listening, you choose to still make your payment. That's fine, but we need you to be prepared for what probably is going to be a very, significant slowdown come fourth quarter. It is natural and normal for the markets, except in, vacation property markets and, where snowbirds go, let's say. I realize those markets are the opposite of the rest of the world. But for the most part, the markets definitely slow down in fourth quarter. It happens every year. That happens when there's not a depression or a recession. That happens when there's not a pandemic, right? When there's not an election. But this year, you can rest assured that we're not going to be ending the year with a boom. So sell your butts off now, because we are going to be experiencing a decidedly wonderful shift in the market where it's going to feel like a seller's market. We are hearing from all of our coaching clients that they're getting, really frankly, picking up the sales that they had already lost for the past almost 90 days, and everything's back on track for the most part. But everyone listen to what Julie and I are saying. It's not going to last, so make the most of it. Now, mortgage forbearances, your PPP loan, your EIDL loan, the different programs, the different government lifeline programs that were created for all of you. Are you taking advantage of these? We've made it very easy for you to shortcut your learning curve on all of that. We've encapsulated all the information. We've dug through all the websites and all the forums, and we've given you all the best information, and it is free. It is part of our free coaching program that we introduced, by the way, as a result of us trying to help all of you guys during the pandemic. And all you have to do is text the word survival to 31996. And when you do, we're going to text you back a join link. And on that join link, you're going to be able to then obviously log into the website, get the Ultimate Agent Survival Guide, which is what we call it. And within the first section, which is called Personal, you're going to find all the information I just promised. So do not wait in getting that done. You absolutely positively need to get that done. We have had a lot of you who are getting your PPP loans, and that's fantastic. There is a relatively complicated way to document the fact that you use the PPP loan for its intended purposes, and we have included all that information on the Ultimate Agent Survival Guide. And you need to start filling out that paperwork. It's not anything you need any accounting help with. It's relatively straightforward. There just is a lot of it,
and it is required. It didn't used to be. This was like a thing that came out last week, when everybody was questioning, well, how exactly are we going to facilitate a loan turning into a grant? This is how you have to use their form.
Right, and you fill out this form, and then the loan that you got from the SBA for your Paycheck Protection Program will be turned into a grant. A grant is, in essence, free money, right? So the other thing is the EIDL loan. And the EIDL loan there's two on the website. I know it's kind of confusing when you log into the SBA site. But we, on the, essentially on the free coaching program, we have given you the correct link and all the correct paperwork and telling you exactly how to fill it out. Most of you are getting loans, and this is a loan, not a grant. Most of you are getting EIDL loans, which is different from the PPP. You're getting them approved and relatively quick. Now, here's the deal with the EIDL loans. Like I had a coaching client that had his approved yesterday for $150,000. If I remember correctly, the amount was amortized over 30 years. The payment was like $770 a month or something like that. But he can just basically make the payment and keep the money unspent, right? And but the money was transferred to his account. It's sitting in his checking account. He can spend it for specific things. That's what the EIDL loan is for. All which are, practical business things. But the reality of it is, in his case, he's going to, if he spends it at all, he's going to spend it when he has to. He's going to, he's put all of his mortgages in forbearance in preparation of a slower market. If the market, for some reason, we're wrong and it doesn't slow down, and you guys want to essentially pay the EIDL loan back, just essentially write a check, send it back to him. There's no prepayment penalty. So if you listen to what we're telling you, we're going to give you best practices on how to essentially maneuver through this rapidly changing market. It's going to be up and then it's going to be down. And it looks, from all measures, from everything we're reading, everything we pay attention to, it definitely looks like we're going to be in a long-term, call it what you will, recession or depression. And by long-term, 3 to 5 years, with another probably 3 to 5 years to actually get back to where we were just 2 months ago. That is what happens when you shut the global economy down. That is what happens when you pump trillions of dollars into the economy. Those are the unintended consequences are just getting started. Julie?
That's right. So on to things that we love and things we hate. I'm going to start with something I hate. NOAA came out with its hurricane season predictions. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, that's NOAA, predicts 2020 will be an above-average hurricane season with up to 10 hurricanes. NOAA expects 3 to 6 to be Category 3 or higher, which is wind speeds of 110 or more. So that's something to add to a pandemic. Why not?
Well,
so, not a big fan of that, but...
Has there ever been a year where NOAA hasn't predicted
there's going to be hurricanes?
More hurricanes. And has there ever been a year?
So.
Has there ever been a year?
It has been 5 years in a row that has broken normal averages.
But when we lived back in Ohio, has there ever been a year where they didn't predict it was going to be the worst winter ever?
No. It's just something you say.
Weather drama.
So we'll take that one with a grain of salt and take one storm at a time. In other news, things I love. Well, this is the big day for Miss Zoe. She is experiencing her very last day of kindergarten and super excited to go on to first grade, but it's been interesting to see her process it. She was talking about how she's excited and sad at the same time, and do I have to graduate or can I go do kindergarten again? And then she's like, well, maybe not if I'm going to be the only person, but what if I was the only person who graduated? But what that shows me is that without having the communal class graduation, like all in one day with a big deal walking across the stage or whatever, they're pretty disjointed about how they feel about it. So she literally went through almost every classmate of all of her 19 friends and asked if each one of them was going to be allowed to go to first grade. So, she's checking the boxes, but it's exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Things I love, things I hate. Actually, I'm not prepared. I haven't come across anything I particularly hated or anything I particularly loved. Oh, okay. I'll tell you one thing. I love the fact that Joe Rogan has moved his podcast over Spotify. So I love the fact that Joe Rogan, guys, is the number. He has a podcast that he does. If you don't listen to it, you should. He does it virtually every single day. But his podcast is then he puts it on YouTube and he just, basically syndicates it. And he has essentially the largest daily listened to, consumed media platform on planet Earth. Joe Rogan. Okay? He has more people listening to him on podcasts, watching the same podcast on YouTube than essentially virtually anything else. New York Times doesn't have as many people paying attention. The 3 major news outlets don't have as many people paying attention. So evidently, there's a story that I believe is true, that YouTube, so Joe likes to talk about what Joe's going to talk about. And this is not, rowdy stuff. This is, a lot of it's essentially... I would call it contrarian information. I would call it sometimes conspiracy sort of information. I would call it information that definitely most people don't talk about but should know about at the very least. He doesn't go too far ahead of his skis and talking about anything too crazy. But what he does is he interviews, essentially people that aren't certainly mainstream. He'll interview, Jordan Peterson, who some of you guys have known about. He essentially struck it big when he went on Joe's podcast. But people thought Jordan Peterson was some sort of crazy right-wing Nazi zealot, and then they got to know him on Joe's podcast, and then essentially, Jordan's podcast or Jordan's book and his podcast and speaking engagements, and now there's a slight wrinkle in the social fabric, and people are starting to listen more and more to the types of thoughts that are coming out of someone like Jordan Peterson. Those types of things are counter to the generalized mass media message. And also, what's really fascinating is, I didn't know this, but essentially on YouTube, you will be demonetized, or in some cases your videos will not be searchable if you're talking about things like the coronavirus and you're not saying essentially the government dogma. You're not essentially passing along the same sort of information that's essentially coming out of the government. If you were to have on your podcast a doctor who does not necessarily agree with the news or as it's being reported about a particular say the coronavirus, YouTube is taking those videos down, or they're hiding them, and that's happening on Twitter too. So what's happened is all these big media platforms, YouTube, really Facebook to a large extent, Twitter, all of these, different. The podcasting space is somewhat safe. There hasn't been a lot of essentially editing of free speech on the podcasting formats, but it's coming. And so what Joe evidently was having problems with was YouTube essentially trying to tell him what he's allowed to talk about. And there was a really good example. So Joe had, what's his name? Elon Musk on his podcast. And Elon Musk, in like 3/4 of the way through it, started talking about the coronavirus. Well, Joe tracked the number of downloads to that Elon Musk interview. It was well over 100 million. But what YouTube did, and what somehow the numbers were reported, and then essentially the media was not easy to find of that podcast unless you go to iTunes or something, and they reported it as being something like 1 million. So not only did they make it not easy to find and download, but they also were misreporting the number of people that actually were interested in the content. It's complete and total overreach. Now, these are private companies, and they have their terms of service, and they can do what they want to. You want to broadcast on their platforms, I suppose you have to comply. But at what point do some of these terms of service basically become overreaching, anti-free speech, and all these types of things? I don't know. I don't have the answer to it. But this is supposedly this is the reason that Joe decided to go to Spotify, because the deal he struck with Spotify was that, well, A, he's going to get $100 million. There's that. And B, and it wasn't all a lump sum, it's over a contract. And B, he is essentially going to be allowed to syndicate and talk about whatever he wants to. And they're essentially not going to do any policing or trying to controlling of his information. So the rumor is, and what he is saying through different people, is the reason he took the Spotify contract was because, now he was making, by the way, $50 million a year from his podcast. So realistically, the Spotify deal might actually net him less than what he's making now. So for those of you who are not clear that you can make money from podcasts, well, maybe you should start thinking about that, because you absolutely can. So overall, it seems like it's going to be an interesting twist, because if Joe is the biggest big mouth on the block and he's actually commanding more audience and attention than all the traditional media outlets, and he is now going to be given free liberty to talk about things that are, let's say, for example, more libertarian in nature, or maybe more controversial and less mainstream, that means those topics are then going to have a lot of fuel on them that Twitters of the world aren't going to be able to stymie. I think that's fascinating. So I guess that goes in the category of what I love and what I hate. What do you think about that?
For sure. Well, I mean, it's all interesting to see how it's going to transpire and how these businesses are handling it and how it's all going to change, how we might be affected by some of this.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we're on Spotify, but they didn't pay us $100 million.
Yeah, well, maybe we should write a letter about that now that there's precedent. I'm just saying, what does that calculate to per listener times how many listen? I don't know how they do that.
Well, I'll tell you, because I researched it. Basically, for every 1,000 listens you have or downloads you have, it's for every 1,000, it basically works out to be about $150. So if you have a podcast where you have 10,000 people listen or stream, which is very few. I mean, there's very few podcasts in the world that have that many. Ours does. Sure. But then we could hypothetically be essentially making about $1,500 a day from doing podcasts.
Hey, I like how that sounds.
Yeah, well,
another spoke.
But maybe we'll do that. I mean, but truthfully, we the only thing products we push on our podcast are ours. We don't promote anybody else's, and we've done that for the most part because we wanted to keep our messaging pure. Because whenever you start taking somebody's money, because they're an advertiser or a marketer, then they're going to have some influence on your messaging of what you're willing to say, and so that's, I guess, the primary reason why we haven't done it. But hey, there's a little meandering down the black hole for all of you guys to learn from. Right. Well, anything else you'd like to say to these guys, Julie?
No, just keep an eye. I think we have a mixture of good news and bad news happening out there, but we're trying to always sort it out for you and let you know what affects you. So watch what's happening with mortgages, certainly. Dot your I's, cross your T's, make hay while the sun shines. Things are changing very quickly, but it's your job to participate in it.
Hey, God bless all of you. Happy Memorial Day.
This program has been a presentation by Tim and Julie Harris, Real Estate Coaching. For more information on our real estate coaching and training programs, visit our website at timandjulieharris.com. Remember to tune in weekdays at noon for upcoming shows. And until next time, thank you for listening to Real Estate Coaching Radio with Tim and Julie Harris.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.